Today is Monday, April 25th, and we are in Port Sheldon today for our presentation. Our agenda is in front of us. With that said, we do have a short presentation that we'd like to make. Jim has put together a short little video on our chair, Bill Vanderbilt, who passed last weekend. And so if we could see the video, I think you're going to find it pretty inspirational.
Before we begin out here along with the animals at the Outdoor Discovery Center, we'd like to We are open to a motion to adjourn. So I hear one coming from Kevin, and it's supported by John Kleinexel the first. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Rest in peace, Bill. With that said, Bill and I had a relationship that many of you may or may not know, but back in 1984, the Hamilton High School boys basketball team were the underdogs in the state championship to take the Class C title. And Bill's son, Bill Jr., was on that team. So Bill and I had many fond memories of reliving that particular night since I'm a graduate of the Hamilton High School. I can still remember that evening that they won. I was actually working on patrol for the Holland Police Department, and I can still remember going past Russ's South at about 9:30 at night. Hamilton boys win. So it's a good thing. So. I get very fond memories of Bill, and I'll never forget him. Steve, anything?
Well, certainly, if I can get through this, his involvement with the MACC, went far beyond running this meeting. He really made himself available to staff to talk about things.
We got you covered.
And he's a great listener, a great soundboard, and he really did care about staff.
He did. Not only about staff, but you look at the greater Holland community. And Bill is one of those leaders that we always look towards as far as looking forward. And I think we had it up there, always looking for the win-win situation. That was Bill Vanderbilt. So we owe him a lot, and let's keep his family in our prayers and thoughts. And moving on, just on another note, I'm going to just say Punkage R, because I'm sorry I can't say his last name, has agreed to serve as interim chair until we can find a permanent replacement. So Punkage couldn't be here today, so you're stuck with me again. So, with that, I'd look forward to a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
I so move.
We have a motion and support. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll entertain a yes motion to approve. If so, respond by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? thank you. Do we have any member of the public that wants to comment?
Well, maybe before we go any further, we said goodbye to someone, but we're saying hello
Oh, yes.
to someone new. You know, there's a new face at the table.
Well, everybody knows him. David Ben Ginghoven. David, if you could just give us a brief synopsis of your career and...
Sure. I was involved in Berrien County down there as an assistant superintendent of a school district, Three Oaks River Valley. Was very involved with community events there. I moved up to Zeeland in 1990 to take the assistant superintendent role of Zeeland schools because down in River Valley I was demolishing buildings and I really didn't want to do that anymore. I wanted to build buildings instead. So I became involved with Zeeland schools growth. And along the way did all those things we typically do, Chamber of Commerce and United Way. And then in roughly 1999 was asked to be a part of the Zeeland Township Board. And so I was there for several years, moved out to Port Sheldon, became involved with Ottawa County Parks, just recently Port Sheldon Planning Commission. So my family's kind of had a history of community involvement. My father was on the township board of Chickering Township when he passed away at age 84. So it kind of is something I've been a part of all my life. So look forward to getting this perspective from this group and being a part of it. So appreciate the invitation and the opportunity.
Well, thank you very much, and I think it brings a great depth to this board.
Appreciate it.
So with that, I think we should probably all introduce ourselves to you as well, David. So we'll start with the Honorable Judge Myers.
Honest Myers from several different townships over the years.
Joe Bauman, Ottawa County Commission.
Tom Bird, Ottawa Road Commission.
Todd Walters, Olive Township.
Jerry Hunsberg, Park Township.
Terry Hoffmeyer, Lake Town Township.
Steve Boltice, Executive Director of the MACC.
Blaine Copes from the MACC.
John Lanham from the Michigan Department of Transportation, Lansing.
Howard Bauman, Port Sheldon Township.
Terry Nienhuis, Holland Township.
Kevin Kleister, City of Zeeland.
I'm going to take it out.
I think you know me.
Ken DeWert, Drumline Township.
L.A. Zeeland Township.
Great. And from the gallery, please.
John Langdon, Michigan Association of Railroad Passengers.
I'm Liz Callan with Michigan Environmental Council.
Aaron Smith with the MACC.
Carolyn Olmstead with the MACC.
Elisa Burkwater with the MACC.
Kelly Gower with the MACC.
Thank you all. With that, we'll move into our public comment. Anyone from the audience wish to address this committee? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment section and move on to presentation. Steve.
All right, the last time we talked about the coast-to-coast passenger rail ridership around this table was after there had been a public input session conducted here by Liz Gallen in Holland. It had a very nice turnout, and she did a great job of running that session that evening. Just by way of reminder, because it's been a couple of years, but our organization did provide some match support in the amount of about $500 to match a, I believe, state grant, correct, Liz, to undertake the study?
Actually, it's the Federal Transit Administration.
Oh, it was an FTA grant,
Yep.
okay. So we participated in that, as well as a number of others that you saw if you had a chance to look at the handout included in your agenda packet. And with that, Liz is going to walk us through the highlights of the study.
Alrighty. Get my mic clipped on here. Thank you so much for having me here today. Oops, let me do it this way. There we go. And as Steve said, my name is Liz. I'm with the Michigan Environmental Council, and we're really leading the early efforts on looking at reestablishing a passenger rail service between Detroit and Holland, Michigan. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of go over some of our results. We did a base level feasibility study. We were really seeking to answer two main questions about the service, which are how much will it cost and how many people will ride it. And so what we're considering, this base level feasibility study kind of took a high level look at those questions, and it was a good way to really build a foundation and decide, does it make sense for us to look at this further? Does it make sense to investigate this into a full feasibility study? just things like that. So, and we really appreciate your past support from the MACC, and we've been around kind of doing these presentations in the region, and we're really excited to tell you all about this today. So as a part of the study, we looked at 3 different route options for the corridor. And so between Holland and Lansing, we looked at the same line. And then between Lansing and Detroit, we looked at 3 different route options. One going through Jackson over to Ann Arbor, one going to Howell down to Ann Arbor into Detroit, and then one going from Lansing through Howell, kind of directly down into Dearborn, and then into Detroit. So we looked at these 3 different options for a couple different reasons. Number one, most importantly, there's rail infrastructure existing on all these corridors and all these options. So we're not talking about building new rail line, we're talking about using what is existing. A lot of these lines have freight rail running on them now. It's extremely common for freight and passenger rail to run on the same line. It happens all the time, and so that's probably the most important reason why we're looking at these route options. But secondly, we also wanted to kind of narrow down what we were looking at so we could better understand what the cost and ridership might look like. And we also are not identifying one route, but we wanted to look at kind of the pros and cons and understand what we're working with. So along with those different route options, we looked at 2 different technology options for the service. So we looked at a 79-mile-an-hour service, which is what you see on Amtrak, most of Michigan's Amtrak service today, and then 110-mile-an-hour option, which is, of course, a higher speed option. And we do have 110-mile-an-hour service actually on Amtrak in Michigan today between the Detroit and Chicago corridor. But this is actually using a different train. So it's a diesel tilting train, which means it can go around curves faster, increasing the overall trip time, along with being able to go up to 110 miles an hour. And along with the route and technology options we looked at, we also looked at 3 different frequency options. So we wanted to understand how things change when you add more trips and kind of play with different speeds. So we kind of wanted to plug and play what the different options were, what did they look like. And so for the 79-mile-an-hour option, we looked at 2 daily round trips and 4 daily round trips. For the 110-mile-an-hour option, we looked at 4 daily round trips and 8 daily round trips. So that's kind of sort of the more basic service level, and then the higher end, kind of more frequency, higher speed end of the service spectrum. And so along with looking at ridership and cost, of course we wanted to know how long would it take. That's a part of that whole process. And a big reason why I wanted to include this in this slide here is because it's really important that we make sure that any service we're looking at is competitive or at least kind of comparable to automotive travel, because anytime you're looking at trying to have another transportation option, there's a lot of different things people might consider. Of course, cost you're going to look at comfort, what your stress level might be, but you're also probably first and foremost at least, you're going to look at how much time it's going to take. So having it be comparable to what it might take you to drive is going to be really important for us moving forward. So, and the longer trip time, we're looking at about a 4-hour trip, and that's from Holland down to Detroit, so like the full corridor. And then on the higher speed option, we're looking at 2 hours and 45 minutes. Just to kind of give you a base level to consider. So our ridership estimates, this is a snapshot. This is our 2030 estimates, but if you look in the packet, you can see how those change over time. But we're looking at the most basic service level. We're looking at about 300,000 riders per year. And then on the high end of the spectrum, with that 110-mile-an-hour service going 8 times a day, we're actually looking at almost 1.5 million riders per year. So I really wanted to show this slide to give you an idea of how those different elements, changing the speed, the frequency, really does alter what the ridership might look like. So that's just to kind of give you a snapshot of that. And then as kind of the other really important component of this study was, what is it going to cost? And so we looked at the capital costs. And as I mentioned, we have existing rail lines in this corridor, but they, generally speaking, all need to be upgraded to meet the safety standards that are required for a passenger rail service. And so that's what I'm talking about here for capital costs. A lot of it is doing different safety upgrades so the trains can go to those speeds, that 79 or that 110 mile an hour speed, upgrading some crossings, upgrading, maybe putting in a siding so a freight train and a passenger train can pass each other. And those things are detailed out in the report, but that just kind of gives you an idea of what we're talking about here. And one of the nice things to point out with this is that it's actually very mutually beneficial for all users of the line. So even though the funding might be directed at getting a passenger rail service up and running, this is also going to benefit your freight rail service because those trains are going to be able to benefit from these upgrades as well. So right now, as an example, between Lansing and Jackson, that line is in very poor condition right now. And so freight trains that are going on that go, maybe John, 20 miles an hour, probably on a good day. And so being able to upgrade the lines for the passenger service also means a good economic development for the freight trains along the same lines. And so looking at the 79 mile an hour capital costs, we're looking at around, roughly speaking, $130 million upfront capital costs. And so that's a lot of money, but generally speaking, in sort of transportation dollars, it would be about the same to build 13 miles of interstate highway, and this is a 186 mile service. So just to kind of put things in perspective, there's a lot of different things that are going into play here, and I'm not asking you to approve a funding bill or anything like that right now, but just to kind of put it in perspective. And then at the 110 mile an hour capital cost, we're seeing a pretty significant increase, and that is because the safety requirements really go up a lot more when you're talking about this faster speed. So you have to really do a lot more upgrades to the rail crossings, the rail lines themselves, to be able to safely go to those speeds. So here we're looking at closer to the $500 million for capital costs. And so another reason why we did how we laid this out was in segments. And in the report, you can see a breakdown of what's all included in each segment. But one of the nice things about that is it will allow us moving forward to understand what a service development plan might look like. And so even looking at the possibility of doing, starting with, for example, like a Holland to Lansing route at first to get things going. And so it gives us an idea of that, as well as how we might be working with the rail companies that own these lines, because there's different segments that are owned by different companies. And so, yeah.
It might be mentioned that over the last 5 years, MDOT has received about $750 million from federal sources. So don't be alarmed at that capital cost coming out of Lansing.
Yeah, and
we'll strive to get it out of Washington.
Yeah, and another thing I should mention, and part of why the capital cost for the 110 mile an hour service is so significantly higher is it would also require that an entity, could be the entity that's operating the service or another entity, actually purchase the line for this level, because the rail companies that own the segments right now just simply don't allow service up to that speed, and that's what was done on the Chicago to Detroit segment that goes 110 miles an hour. So that's, and again, everything's kind of detailed out more so in the report. So looking at not just the capital costs, but then also the operating costs and how much, kind of on an everyday basis is going to be required to run the service. And this chart shows the subsidy or the operating surplus that might be required for the different services. And so at the more basic level, The 79 mile an hour, just for example, the 2 daily round trip option for Route 2, that one that goes through Howell and then down to Ann Arbor, that one would be a $3 million a year required subsidy to do the service. You may or may not know that, generally speaking, transportation services, public transportation services like passenger rail and bus services typically do not recover their operating costs, so they do require some level of subsidy to work. But our report and our consultants found that at that higher level of service, that 110 mile an hour higher frequency service, because you're generating more riders, more ridership, you actually have the possibility to recover your operating costs. And actually have an operating surplus. So you wouldn't require that subsidy, but on the same token, you would require that increased capital cost, which is not included in here. So that's not included to be recovered. But this gives us an idea of what we're working with, what different requirements might be for the operating expenses to be covered, or potentially generate some revenue. So just to kind of wrap up here, we did a lot of public engagement around this concept in this last summer. We talked to about 575 residents. We did 16 public meetings, and we really wanted to get just start the conversation and let people know, we're looking at this. We want you to be involved. We didn't want to, start talking to folks when we're already saying, okay, we're going to build this in 3 years or in 2 years or something like that. So we're really trying to get the conversation started early so folks can be involved in not just the general public, but also organizations like yours, economic development organizations. We were just at Lakeshore Advantage this morning, talking to businesses and different community entities and organizations that might be involved in collaborating on something like this. So just kind of a snapshot of some of the public feedback that we got. A lot of people liked the idea because it would be less stressful. They wouldn't have to deal with the driving and parking and driving in the winter weather. And, if they wanted to go to Detroit, for example, to see a baseball game, they wouldn't have to worry about parking, or a festival over here on the west side of the state. Another thing that we heard on the sort of concern side of things were, okay, how do I actually get to my final destination? How do I connect from, if I'm going to a city and I'm getting off at the train station, how do I get to my meeting? So they were concerned about the transportation options within the community, so public transit or other transportation services that might be involved. And so one thing we really are going to be doing moving forward is collaborating closer with different public transit agencies or other transportation providers that might be involved in making that final kind of what's typically called the last mile connection. Because if you're going to Lansing for a meeting, you get off at the train station, but you can't actually go the 2 miles to get to your meeting, you're not going to use the service. So that's going to be a really important piece moving forward. So next steps. So the kind of technical next step is going to be doing a full feasibility study. So we're looking at different funding options for that. It could be a federal grant, could be different options. But between now and then, we're really trying to build what we're going to call the Coast to Coast Rail Alliance. So we're really going to try to go across the corridor, talk to community groups like yours, talk to different planning agencies, different private organizations that might exist, and start building that case for support and collaboration so it can be something that is, it has a lot of support behind it from a whole wide variety of different people and organizations. So that's kind of what we're doing right now. And we're also looking at, what could the implementation of this service look like. We're really trying to be open-minded and innovative about what this might look like. We're not assuming it's going to be an Amtrak service. We are not assuming that it is going to be even a public run service. It could be a public-private partnership piece. So we're looking at a lot of different options and really trying to figure out what the best option would be for Michigan and for all the communities along the route to benefit. As Steve mentioned, the MACC provided some funding for our local match for the Federal Transit Administration grant. We also had support from these other organizations to provide some funding for that local match. And And then that's all I have, and I'm happy to answer any questions people might have. I also have my contact information, and I have these logos on here because it's been already a really collaborative effort. We're working with MDOT, we're working with the different planning related entities and metro councils and things like that. We're working with Michigan Association of Railroad Passengers, that's where John is from. And so we're really working on it on a collaborative basis so far. All right, thanks. Yeah.
Does this work as a commuter train between Holland and Grand Rapids?
So that could be something that's looked into. As I mentioned, part of why we wanted to kind of break out the capital costs is so we can understand what the segments might look like if you did it on a segmented basis. At this time, we are not thinking of it as a commuter service, but that doesn't mean that this information and data that we're collecting couldn't be used to develop something like that. The main reason why we're not looking at it as that is because of the way the schedule would work out, is that it's designed more as a longer range city connection that might be used by business travelers, but not necessarily commuters on an everyday basis.
How many stops would you have?
Yeah, so right now, that's something that's still in development, and hasn't been any kind of hard and fast decisions about like what cities or what communities is it going to stop in, but we are thinking preliminarily it's going to stop at these major cities where the yellow spots are, but that doesn't mean that it couldn't stop in other communities as well. One example of that, and I think this could be replicated in other communities too, is just east of Grand Rapids, Cascade Charter Township. They have the airport there. And so we're looking at having a stop there because that would allow people to get to the airport, the Grand Rapids area airport, but there would also be a stop in downtown Grand Rapids. So that's just kind of an example.
It might be noted that 2 of the 3 options will be allowing the judge and Steve to go to a football game in Ann Arbor by rail.
Given the 2 different miles per hour, you got 79 versus 110. You explained earlier, and I think I missed it, but you're saying that the 110 would generate a lot more revenue, and I'm just wondering how you came to that, because it seems to me like you wouldn't gain that much. In this particular trip, you gained 45 minutes, if my 3rd grade math is okay.
Yeah, so that's true. You don't gain as much time as you might think you would, but even that little bit of time that you do gain actually does make a big difference as far as the ridership numbers go. But more importantly, I think even than the speed is the frequency. And also when we're talking about a 79 mile an hour and 110 mile an hour service, that is up to 110 miles an hour. So that doesn't mean that the train's going 110 miles an hour, because of course it has to slow down when it's passing through communities, and also when the curvature of the track changes, there's just some areas where the geometry just simply won't allow, even with the tilting trains, it to go that speed. But as far as the ability to recover those costs and things, it's really a combination of that frequency and that speed piece. We also looked, we didn't dive in really deeply, but we also looked at a 90 mile an hour option. So we didn't dive really deep into the 90 mile an hour option, but that could be a good middle ground that could still use a little bit of the more basic trains, but still maybe have some of the other positive impacts that some of the increased speed traffic does allow. Yeah.
I'm just looking at the map here. I'm making this assumption that if indeed you go through Ann Arbor, you would connect to the Detroit Metro Airport as well.
Yep, so in the Detroit Metro Airport connection, it would be, you wouldn't be able to go right up to the airport, but you would be able to get very close, and then there could be a shuttle bus taking folks from the station to the actual airport.
Similar to this in Atlanta.
Yes, a lot of cities do, where they have a heavy rail that stops close by, and then there's a shuttle. And they're actually also looking at, actually a lot further along in development is a commuter rail service from Ann Arbor to Detroit, and that would have an airport stop as well. And so one of the nice things about option 1 and 2 here, the blue and the purple lines, is that connection between Ann Arbor and Detroit is already being, the capital costs are already being spent because they're looking at the commuter rail service. So that has that benefit to that other service, and then this service would be able to benefit from the money that's already being spent.
It might be noted that the Cascade Charter Township, on their long-term plan, have a stop at Ford Airport.
Oh, great.
It'd be on the opposite side of the terminal, and likewise, the train goes just between Grand River in Lansing and the airport itself. So there's possibility. Did I say that loud enough? Possibility that there'll be a stop maybe at the Lansing airport.
Right.
Oh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Sorry, MDOT, excuse me, rail passenger staff review the study?
Yeah. We had Therese Cody and Tim Hefner both on the steering committee, so they've been really involved so far in the development of this concept, and they definitely will continue to be involved.
And they're comfortable with the results thus far, including the ridership estimates and cost estimates?
Yeah, absolutely. And we did have some conversations, and we also compared some studies that were being done in the Southeast Michigan area with some commuter rail services, and so we're able to kind of share some data and also share some data that MDOT had, of course, with the work they're doing on the Chicago to Detroit line and things like that.
Have you looked at other states, you know, with what they're doing? We were in Florida this spring, and they're trying to put a high-speed rail from Orlando to Miami with no stops.
Yep.
And I guess all of the locals are all quite up in the air because it was on the
They, of
news
course,
quite
want to
often.
Yeah,
you
they
know.
want to protect the smaller communities. Yeah, so that is something that we are doing, but we do want to do more of, is looking at case studies and what are other communities doing, especially as it relates to the Florida project actually specifically, and they're looking at public-private partnerships and a non-Amtrak operator, and so I think there's a lot we can learn from that. Obviously, you know, there's also, you know, hopefully things that we could do differently, especially if it's not going so well at the moment. But yeah, we are and we plan to continue to kind of look at what other states are doing. John, do you have any comments on that? I don't know. You're familiar with the Florida service probably more so than I am.
In Texas, you have private individuals looking for investment, and they're not nonprofits, so they're looking for a return on their investment. And they feel, I mean, they've gone a long ways away. There's a lot of money that's already been spent in the planning stages by private enterprise.
You may have mentioned this during your presentation, but how is this passenger rail interfaced with freight rail?
Yeah, so along all of these lines, there is freight rail that exists and is used. And so the way that it would work is they would coexist on the same line, and depending on the speed and how the schedule would work, there could be sidings or basically like a passing lane that's built on the tracks to allow one or the other to move over to the side and allow each other to pass one another. But it's very, very common for freight and passenger to run on the same lines. And so the way it would work is that a freight, for example, if the freight company, or not the freight company, if a private railroad company owned the line that the passenger rail, which is the case generally speaking, there's a few publicly owned segments, but the way that would work is that the passenger rail operator would then pay a lease to allow that service to use that segment of line. And then in the case of if the entity that was operating it owned, that was operating the passenger service owned the line, then the freight service would then pay a lease to the passenger owner. So either way, you know, there's an exchange of money that happens for the use of the line. If that makes sense.
Any other questions?
If not, thank you very much, Liz.
Yeah,
We
thank you all
appreciate
so
it.
much. I appreciate the opportunity to come here and talk. Hopefully we'll be back.
Thank you. Moving on to MACC Watershed Project. Kelly, the floor is yours.
Okay. All right, so first I wanted to provide some information on an update that we've done recently to our public education plan. This was part of our updates of the stormwater permits for the permitted communities in the watershed. And before I talk about the public education plan, I just want to just kind of share, this is a full completed stormwater management plan for the city of Holland, just so you kind of have an idea of the scale of what these plans are like. So the public education plan is just one little component of the larger stormwater management plan. Again, these are for the stormwater permits required by the city of Holland, City of Zeeland, Ottawa and Allegan County, and then the 2 county road commissions. So the stormwater permits had some requirements for the public education plan that were above and beyond what is in our existing information and education strategy that's part of the watershed management plan. So I wanted to just kind of highlight those changes or those differences and what we've done to update the plan. This is not intended to replace the information and education strategy that's in the watershed management plan, but just to enhance our education strategies with the stormwater specific topics. So with the stormwater permit, what that required or what the option was within the permit is that you could prioritize the topics that you have in your education plan. So there's 10 topics. You could choose to do all of them or prioritize them. And so we chose to prioritize those, and that process is spelled out in here. But essentially what we did is we have an information and education team made up of stakeholders in the watershed that we put the 10 topics on sheets of paper around the room and gave everybody stickers, and they could give it a red sticker if they thought it was high priority, a yellow sticker if it was low priority, and orange if it was medium. And then we also sent out a Survey Monkey survey asking the same things. So I think we got 40-some people participated in that process. So we ended up with 5 of the topics as high priority, and I'm going to just share those high priority topics. If you want to know all 10 topics, I mean, I can pass this around, I can send you a copy of this. It's not available on our website yet. We will post them soon, but it has not been approved yet by the state, so we don't want to move forward with posting this stuff publicly too quickly. I will mention that of the 10 topics, most of them are topics that we're already covering with our regular public education strategies. So actually the first 4 here that our stakeholder focus groups determined to be high priority, we do already cover. So promoting just general responsibility and stewardship of the watershed. Explaining and raising the awareness of the connection of the stormwater system to waters of the state, that storm drains go directly to a river or lake. We already do that. Proper application and disposal of pesticides, herbicides, and fertilizers, and then also household hazardous waste. You know, we partner with other organizations, with Ottawa County, with the BPW to promote their days. We've got information in our homeowners handbook, so we're already covering those topics. But the 5th one that was identified as high priority is one that we have not really been working on. So this is what we will start focusing on over this next, probably late summer and into fall. We will start pulling our information and education team back together to focus on this new topic. And so this is the wording of it directly out of the permit application is to identify and educate commercial, industrial, and institutional entities likely to contribute pollutants to stormwater runoff. Most of our focus has been on just the general public, homeowners, and then working with, obviously, those of you around the table with the units of government. We have not really focused on outreach to the commercial, industrial, and institutional entities. And I will mention that there are plenty of industrial sites that are already covered under permits. They have to have permits to discharge industrial stormwater. So like the Holland BPW's wastewater treatment plant. They have a permit to discharge industrial stormwater. They have to do certain practices to make sure that the stormwater leaving their site is clean, not just the wastewater discharge. Same thing like Padnos has an industrial stormwater permit to discharge stormwater from their site. So there's plenty that are already covered. It's the smaller and more commercial retail sorts of businesses that are not covered under permits. So that would be our primary audience. But we would work with the information and education team to identify who those target audiences are within the community. Could be private businesses. I see a lot of potential here for shopping centers where they have huge parking lots that contribute a lot of stormwater. So we would certainly welcome your input on that process, and I will certainly let you know when we do move this process forward. If anybody wants to join our information and education team, you're always welcome to do that. We're probably going to get through Water Festival this summer first before we even start thinking about that, though. So kind of what would this look like at the end? Really what we're looking to do for the commercial industrial is the same thing that our communities are doing for what's called the pollution prevention and good housekeeping component of their permits, which I will spend time at a future meeting explaining more in detail what the permit requirements are. But essentially, we've created guidebooks for the municipalities that have the stormwater permits that basically deal with property and facility maintenance. So what activities are occurring on the property that could have the potential to impact stormwater? And then what are the best practices that we would recommend to reduce the potential for pollution? So I've got some examples here. Some of the obvious ones, lawn care and landscaping, kind of proper mowing and fertilizer techniques, which we do have the lawn care seal of approval program for that. Other things like winter operations. Springtime is my favorite time of year to drive around to parking lots and see all of that lovely snow pollution going right directly into our storm drains and into Lake MACC. So that certainly is an issue that we would want to address with especially large parking lots where they're storing snow in parking lots, which is really not a best practice. They should be storing the snow in a permeable area. So these are the kind of things that we would look to kind of develop best practices for in a guidebook and then distribute those to our target audiences. And one thing that I thought would be effective was at Chamber of Commerce events where they have like the early bird breakfasts that they look for sponsors. We might be able to do that and distribute materials that way. But we'll obviously have to look for other ways to do that and other ways to get in contact with kind of our key businesses, especially the shopping centers, as I mentioned. So again, we would look for any sort of input or insight that you would have to how we would get this information out to our target audiences. So I think that might be, yeah. So any questions on that? Like I said, I will keep you aware of the process as we move forward with this and welcome your involvement and input. No? Okay.
Is the DEQ stepping up their stuff on stormwater runoff, or how it runs through the cities?
Well, you mean with these stormwater permits?
Yeah. Someday will you see that we'll have to do something different with our stormwater with the DEQ?
Possibly, but that's not going to come from the DEQ. It's going to come from the EPA. Because this program originates from the EPA at a federal level, and it's just in the state of Michigan, the DEQ has authority over the program. So there's been some changes that have been discussed at the federal level. I mean, they will take years before they come down to the state level. So with the current permit applications, there are some significant changes to how construction or post-construction runoff is handled from development sites. So that will certainly impact planning commission reviews of properties. It will impact how developers design stormwater best practices. So as of right now, that's the significant change that we're going to see for the better. And I think all of the representatives that we work with from the counties and the cities are supportive of those changes.
I know at one point they worried that we would have to start treating our stormwater through the sewer plant. So you haven't heard anything?
No. No, and I doubt that would happen because there's been such an effort to separate stormwater and get it out of the sewer plants. Yeah. Yeah, John.
Kelly, I would think that that given your efforts and that in a way you would be ahead of the game, that this area would be ahead of the game in terms of your relationship with and what EPA may consider to be good practices and activities in analyzing these kinds of situations. So, I mean, you've over, at least since I've been here anyway, you've presented a lot of good material and a lot of good analysis and study of the MACC watershed area, and it seems like this area is moving in the right direction anyway, in terms of mitigating any impacts. You know, so in my mind, I think you're ahead of the game, at least what it seems like anyway.
Well, thank you. That's very kind of you to say. And I know we've working with kind of cross watersheds with folks in the Lower Grand and trying to collaborate a little bit and streamline some of the efforts that we're doing. Trying to look at what other states are doing, and we haven't really found any good examples of what other states are doing to address the stormwater permits in a productive and feasible way. So I think we've got some, kind of statewide through the MS4 communities, especially in southern Michigan, between kind of Washtenaw County, Ann Arbor, Grand Rapids, and Holland area, some new and innovative things going on right now. It's still to be determined if the DEQ will accept everything that we're proposing to do, but we have a very positive response from them so far. So, thank you. Okay. I do have just a few other things, some reminders and updates. We do have some events coming up. The river cleanup, the spring river cleanup is this Saturday, so keep your fingers crossed for good weather there. Next Wednesday, May 4 at 4 o'clock are the Hope Student Research presentations. So there was an invitation in your policy packet. All of your township trustees and city council members should have also received mailed invitations, as well as our local state representatives and senators received invitations, as well as our federal elected officials. So those invitations went out. We've promoted it through our regular newsletter, through our, it was in the MACC Monthly this week. So we've got a decent group of folks that have already RSVP'd, but there certainly is plenty of room. So I'd encourage you, if you're able to attend those. There's 3 presentations. The topics are listed on the invitation, and I am very excited about what the students are starting to work on this semester, and hopefully some of these will be able to continue on. We did reschedule the Watershed Advisory Committee meeting to the first week of May. It would have typically been this week Thursday, but just due to some other scheduling conflicts, we moved that till next week. And I still need to send out a reminder about that, so you should receive that. We did publish our spring newsletter a little bit late this year, but that has been gone out in the mail and through our e-newsletter. I do have some packets here. If you're able to take those back to the township and city offices, I would ask that you do that. If you don't take them, then we will get them delivered. And then there are some loose copies there as well. that aren't labeled with a particular township or city name. So if you do take them, please take the one that is labeled appropriately so we know who still needs them. And then just a couple quick updates that this all happened fairly quickly. We did receive notification that we were awarded 2 of the grants that we had applied for, the 2 through MACC, which is actually through the Great Lakes Commission. We did receive the funding for the river cleanup grant that will actually support our fall river cleanup. They did reduce that funding slightly, but should not impact what we were intending to do with that. And then we also were notified that we received the road stream crossing inventory grant. I think it was a couple meetings ago I had spoke about that grant, and we have not received the contracts for either of these yet, but with the road stream crossing grant, they said we could start expending funds in May. Even if we don't have the contract signed, it would be retroactive to May 1st. So we will start moving that forward, and we'll let you know how that develops, because we would like to try to get more transportation stakeholders involved in this, since it is a road and stream inventory. And so we have a nice group of volunteers that had already said they were interested, but more on the watershed side of things. So we'd like to get some transportation stakeholders involved if possible. And we will be working very closely with both road commissions, staff from both road commission offices, and then the Allegan Drain Commissioner's Office and the Ottawa Water Resource Commissioner's Office as well. So we're really excited to get this project started. So, all right, any questions about any of these random things?
Thank you, Kelly. We really appreciate the update. Next, under transportation programming, Elisa.
Good afternoon, everyone. I have a few things I wanted to share with you today. First of which is we'd like to request some funding. And today I have a memo that was sent out to you in your packets that I'd like to review briefly, just to let you know what it is we're seeking funding for. We have been talking with the Macatawa Area Express Transportation Authority to do a transit access and connectivity study. And during our pre-Unified Work Program meeting, we were talking with the Michigan Department of Transportation and learned that there were some additional funds available. So what you have before you is a summary of a project we'd like to submit, and this is an action item today. But basically, we're looking for funding to complete a study that would look at existing transit access and connections to other modes. So we're looking at connections to various roadways as well as the non-motorized system and rail. And so it's basically an inventory process, and in the memorandum I explained that it will be using a number of different data layers using our geographic information system. Phase 1 of the program or the study will look at land use relationships, so looking at employers that are currently being served or potentially could be improved upon in terms of service. We're also looking at residential and community services. Phase 2 of the study is more of a longer term look, looking into the future to look at future transit improvements. And we are thinking that this is going to be a project that would start in the current fiscal year, but extend through 2017. So I just wanted to make that clear to you. But we are and phase 2 would look at population densities that would support transit, and it also would look at opportunities to link with adjacent transit systems. I know during our earlier conversation, the question was brought up about rail to Grand Rapids. So that is certainly something. Looking at transit connections to adjacent communities would be an important piece. The application is due a week from Friday, and we've been working on the scope, but do present it to you. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have. One thing I did not mention, which I'd like to share with you as well, is we are looking at performance measures. So being able to track whether we're meeting the goals in our long-range transportation plan. So this is another piece that we're excited to be able to incorporate into the scope of work.
So if I understand correctly, we'd be looking at a motion to authorize staff to seek federal transit administrative funds in the amount of $47,250 in order to complete the regional transit access and connectivity study. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Support.
Good.
Moved by Jerry, supported by Terry.
Got it. Any further discussion? Hearing no further discussion, call for the question. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
So we'll get working on that, submit it before our deadline next week. And the second item that I have for you today is fiscal year 2017 Unified Work Program. So in your packets, we provided 2 new tasks, one of which happens to be the Transit Access and Connectivity Study, which, as I just mentioned earlier, is something that we expect the phase 2 piece of this to continue into the next fiscal year. So we've included that as a new task. And task 3.6, which is a downtown Holland traffic circulation study. That's the title, however, it has more of a regional scope. And basically this would be a traffic engineering analysis of a study area that would reach out into the MACC region. We would need to look at traffic volumes and capacity analysis of several different intersections and corridors. So important to look at our road network, see if we made some changes in the Holland City area, what that impact would be to the entire regional road network. So those are 2 tasks, and I want to just let you know that our process, we give you a list of all the tasks we're anticipating for this next year. But I do want to remind you that it is something that can change. If there's an additional task you feel that needs to be added, or if you give us a request to revise one of our tasks, we can do that at any point during the fiscal year. So, does anyone have a question about those 2 new tasks we're proposing?
At least I have a question. You had a cost estimate for the regional transit access and connectivity study.
Yes.
Will you have a cost estimate for the traffic circulation study as well?
We will. In fact, we'll have the complete document for you for the next meeting. But we did work through a detailed scope of work with MACC Transit in order to get the application turned in next week. So I know that that's in process, and MACC staff is working with the City of Holland to finalize that scope.
So where we're at with that right now, John, at least every year when we're developing the new Unified Work Program, we'll often say to the technical committee, hey, do you have any projects you're interested in working on? The City of Holland brought this one forward. Of course, they were hoping for some funding as well. We took a look at our balance of what used to be called PL 112 funds. These are US DOT provided funds for it, and we had a small balance, and then we said, well, if we could use those to kind of get the project started, and everyone needs to talk nice to John today, because actually how this works is you have to request them in advance from the department, and then they of course check to see if you have the balance, and we do in the amount of that we're talking. But then you still have to request and have MDOT approve that. So right now, the conversation and where the funding is starting to come together, it's estimated that based on the scope that the Holland City engineer would like to do, I'm guessing it's going to be somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000 by the time they finalize the scope. So our 25 is certainly not going to fund the entire study. And if we should end up narrowing the scope a little bit, the technical committee advised staff to provide up to 50% of the study's costs, not to exceed $25,000 in terms of our participation. So that's a little backdrop in terms of the funding for that particular study. And in terms of what the final cost estimate is, we haven't determined that yet. But my guess is, from what the city engineer is talking about, that's looking like it's a $50,000 to $100,000.
Since we have more precise numbers by the time we
Right, yeah.
finalize it.
Right, because that'll have to go in the financial component. So.
And John, if you'd like, you take a sandwich or two with you this afternoon.
That's right, take the leftovers.
Steps in this process for all of the tasks, we'll be looking at time requirements. We'll look at deliverables. We'll have a schedule so that when we present the final unified work program, it's identified when we'll have major milestones. So yeah, so that's what happens next. But before we do all of that work, we wanted to make sure that you've all seen the tasks. You have the opportunity to give us input, add any. Now, today would be the perfect day to do that, and then we'll go ahead and just, we'll continue on.
And so you're looking at like the first week of June or so?
Our next meeting, I believe, June 6th.
Okay, yes.
All right, I have one last item. You get to see a lot of me today. You'll recall that last month I gave a short presentation to let you know about a training that we would be attending. We had received word from the Centers for Disease Control, as well as the National Association of Chronic Disease Directors, that funding was available for a training. That begins tomorrow. It will be this week, and I'm super excited because we were hoping that an analysis could be done before we attended this training. And that work is in process. So before you have a memo regarding the 8th Street capacity analysis. And this ties in, it was basically the step that was recommended after we did a road safety audit in the fall. And we looked at the 8th Street corridor from Chicago Drive to Hope, which would be in, it's from the city to Holland Charter Township. But it's a major east-west corridor with a lot of pedestrian traffic as well as cyclists. And so one of the recommendations was to look at improving access for both pedestrians and cyclists. But we didn't have the data in hand last fall that we now have. We've collected traffic volumes, turning. We literally have counts of each of the turning movements at all the major intersections. And the last piece was done, and in my inbox on Friday afternoon, thankfully, which was a capacity analysis. A quick review of that report indicates that it's quite feasible. So I wanted to let you all know that that is something that we're looking at closely. And again, why are we doing this? The results of this analysis help us to implement safety recommendations along the corridor. And so I'm excited to be able to work with this information. And it's something that will involve many different organizations. So the Ottawa County Road Commission, the Ottawa County Health Department, the City of Holland, Holland Charter Township, all will be sitting at the table having this conversation, as well as, we do need to involve Michigan Department of Transportation as well with that US 31 crossing. So just wanted to make sure you're all aware. I wanted to keep you informed. And again, I'm pretty excited to have this data in hand before we talk further about implementation. Okay. All right, thank you.
Then MDOT update from John Lanham, our MDOT liaison.
I don't have anything substantial in the report, I guess, other than it was another performance management measures that the FHWA is promulgating that you've probably heard about in the last couple of years. There's one new one that was finalized just this past couple of weeks, the system performance measure for the interstate and the CMACC system. And comments are due on that in the next 120 days. I'm sure we will provide comments, the state will. And I'm not sure, Steve, if the APOs, you with any of the other APOs to provide comments on this as well. But that's something that came down from at the federal level. I know we haven't really seen that much of an impact locally in any of these bills of those yet, but there will be some activity that will have to go on at the bills at our level to adhere to those new performance measures in the coming year term. So just be aware of that. I guess that's all I have, other than maybe also saying that Mr. Vanderbilt will, I really am grateful for how he welcomed me to this committee about 3 years ago when I first came to the group with me, and he made quite an impression on me, and I always thought he was very wise and thoughtful, and really acting in the best interest of the entire community, not just for any special interest or group or anything, just for the interest of the entire community. So I was honored to work with him, at least for that short period of time.
Thank you.
Moving into administrative issues, and with that, Steve, I think you've got some business.
That's right. With Bill's passing, he was one of the at-large board members that had banking powers, and so we need to make sure that those are covered. And so at your place setting today is a memo regarding that, and looking at replacing essentially Bill's capacity in terms of banking powers, having Punkage step in and do those types of things, and the specific powers that are being discussed today were included in that memo. Essentially the ability to open depositor share accounts, endorse checks. That's of all the banking powers enumerated here, really the check endorsement is probably the one that we call on our signatories to do the most, but they do have a couple other things in terms of the abilities to withdraw and transfer funds as well. And then lastly, regarding a safe deposit box, the ability to enter into a lease for those.
So we'd be looking for a motion to grant, again, Punkage R, bank powers as detailed in the memo on this topic dated April 19th, 2016.
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have support?
Support.
And we have support. Any further discussion? Yes.
Just a question out of curiosity, Steve, for checks and balances purposes, I assume it takes 2 signatures.
Correct. Yep. So for disbursements above $1,000.
Okay.
So I have the ability to sign on anything 1,000 or less. Above 1,000 requires 2.
I'm going to say mine is Jerry.
Okay. Anything else? Hearing no further discussion, call for the question. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
All right, I think I can get through this next item. Has been talking a little bit about, is the clicker here? I just need the clicker. I'm already all mic'd up. All right, so as I had mentioned a couple months back, we're going to start working on the new budget, and what I like to do prior to presenting that to you for your consideration, which will happen at the June 6th meeting, just wanted to walk through a little bit, give a little bit of overview of the themes and the factors that I see moving forward with the FY17 budget. First of all, I want to start off by stating that, the goal is always to maintain sufficient resources to be able to deliver the services and programs that we do with excellence. And I'm happy to say that the budget as it's coming together is going to certainly be able to do that. So I want that to be, the first point of business and first point to make. However, I would have to say that, this has been a little tougher than some of the other ones that I've worked on, and I just wanted to share with you some of the factors leading to that. On the revenue side, you may recall that as far as general dues are concerned, our dues paid by cities, townships, and counties is based on population. So it's a population-based formula. It's $1 per capita. And as the slide up here shows, during the go-go 90s and prior to the Great Recession, we experienced pretty significant and healthy growth in the MACC area. The average annual between 95 and 2004 was about 5%. Some of you paid a little bit more than 5%, some a little bit less than 5%, but that was the average annual growth. So that was a nice little building that happened every year. It covered increasing operational costs quite nicely. I do have a note up here and that the figures I'm showing on this slide do not include Olive Township and Port Sheldon. They came in 2003. So to keep it apples to apples, their contributions were removed. Since 2004, we have not enjoyed that same level of growth. We went through the Great Recession as the rest of the state did, and the reality has been that from 2005 to 2015, that 10 years, we have seen average annual growth in our population of about 0.4%. So quite a considerable shift there, and certainly when you're population-based, you start to feel the squeeze. I mean, after a while, 10 years of that does have its impact. So certainly population growth and what has happened, I don't know if 0.4% is the new normal. I see a lot of activity. We're hearing reports from you all that things are coming along. So we hope that that improves, but that's where it's been from 05 to 15. But something that helped mitigate a little bit during part of that time period was the addition of new members. As a result of the 2000 decennial census, the urbanized area had expanded into where we're sitting right now, as well as Olive Township. So those communities were invited to join the MACC. They chose to do so. Also, and that happened in 03, in the same year, an invitation for Allegan and Ottawa counties to join the MACC. Not on the dollar per capita. They pay actually 11 cents per capita for the population within each of their jurisdictions. They chose to join the MACC as well. And then in 07, when the Macatawa Area Express became an authority, they joined as well and became dues-paying members. And so when you start looking at, if you take a look at your financial report and you start tallying up the contributions made by all those entities, that was a nice injection of additional revenue into the MACC. So, but 07 was the last time we invited a new member. Our invitation to have people join this group has really always been tied to whether the urbanized area extended into their jurisdiction, and that means an adjustment in our MAB, our metropolitan area boundary. Well, as a result of the 2010 decennial census and the slower growth pattern, we didn't see the urbanized area move into, say, a Blendon Township or an Overijssel Township or something. So we didn't have the opportunity as a result of the 2010 census to invite in new members. So that certainly has had an impact. And then I try to remind you every time we do a budget that we are, for our operational costs, a grant-funded organization. It's over the years been between 60 and 66%, 2/3 of our operational costs have been covered by grants, and those have come from a couple of different sources. We call it now the consolidated grant. Before that, it was the PL 112 and Section 5303 funds that come from the US DOT through MDOT. And what we've experienced over the course of the last 5 years, while it's been stable, and it's been stable all along, you may recall the slide that our auditor, Doug Vredeveld, likes to put up when we talk about grants. You know, these US DOT grants have been very stable, but as MAP 21, the previous transportation legislation was extended and extended it again, you know, we saw fairly flat, but modest increase, you know, usually around 1% or 1.5% occurring on our consolidated grant. I was hopeful that what has typically happened in the past is when Congress passed a new federal surface transportation legislation, we usually got a pretty good bump. You know, 5+% usually came around. Unfortunately, we haven't seen that with the FAST Act. The estimates that were provided by MDOT based on FAST Act were more around the 1.5% to 2% again. So, and of course, that's a 6-year bill. So we may be looking at, again, a continuation of this 1.5%, maybe 2% coming out of what is our largest grant source. You can see in there it accounts for about $240,000. We do get some other funding for operational support from US DOT sources. Our congestion mitigation air quality supports the air quality program. We've used a little piece of STP funding in the past for our data collection program. Again, those are fairly stable, but they tend to fluctuate. The state funding we get from the asset management program, you'll see in your financial statement, we're in for about 20 grand, but it's very restrictive. And despite my best efforts to try to loosen up what we can use that funding for, haven't been successful yet, being able to tap that for more operational costs. On the watershed side, if you can recall the slide that our auditor puts together, certainly the grants that come from outside sources from watershed tend to fluctuate a little bit more than on the transportation side. We've been very successful in receiving those grants to support the watershed project, but they do bounce around a little bit more. What's been very stable for the watershed project are the stormwater watershed dues that you all have been paying. And so that has certainly brought that stability to the program that we all hoped when those were first put in place. We started out at I think it was about 55,000, and then it bounced up for as high as 140,000. But since 2005, we've been at the current figure of 110,000. So we've had about a decade of funding the watershed out of the stormwater watershed dues at that amount. And again, you know, after 10 years, we're starting to feel the impact of that as well. And then quickly, of course, on the expenditure side of things, those are some of the revenue factors. We've had a pretty stable staffing level of, you know, between 4 and 5 FTEs. We're a small shop. The organizers of the MACC intended to have it to be a small shop, and we've, you know, stayed with that philosophy through the years. But it has been, you know, very stable in that regard. And, you know, being a service organization, we've averaged around 50% of operational costs are directly related to personnel. A couple other factors, you know, if you look at the year-end report that comes out in the audit, the variance between budget and actual has been getting smaller and smaller and smaller. I guess that's just another way of saying that, you know, there's less cushion in the budget than there maybe was 5-10 years ago. And certainly the last few budgets that I presented and the one that you're going to be seeing here at our next meeting, it's balanced, certainly, but that revenue over expense is getting smaller and smaller. It's going to be around 1% of budget again this time. And then lastly, on the expenditure side, of course, personnel is a major cost component of the budget, but there are fewer and fewer cost centers in which I'm fine to be able to make adjustments to help balance things. So those are, you know, some of the factors, both on the revenue side and on the expenditure side. Again, I want to just reiterate the first slide there. You're going to see a balanced budget. It's going to be able to deliver the services and programs that we intend to do with excellence. But there are some factors. I think there are a few headwinds moving forward that we need to be cognizant of. So then the schedule as I mentioned, back in March, we take a look at, previous year's budgets and some of the things. We get those estimates when we sit down with John and our partners from US DOT, and we talk about the transportation planning program, so we know where those consolidated grant numbers are going to be at. We get the first draft together and talk about that in April, and I try to give you an overview like we have today. So then we'll finalize the budget, and we'll certainly have the executive committee take a look at it, and then we'll get it out to you in advance of even the agenda packet so you can have ample time to take a look at it. And then the schedule would be for us to bring it forward to you for your consideration at the June meeting.
Can I ask a question? You touched on this, Steve. Substantially grant-funded organization. Are we really maximizing every opportunity for indirect costs, administrative costs, staff time, pulling it out of grants?
Yep, yeah. I mean, to the extent possible, my coworkers will tell you, one of the first questions when they bring a grant opportunity, I said, is there something available to help with, staffing? So, for instance, that transit accessibility study, Elisa didn't happen to mention it, but there's the possibility that MDOT will cover the match on that project. So should that happen, then about 25% of that grant, a little less than 25%, a little over 20%, would come back for staffing costs if we don't have to cover the match. If we got to take the match, if the match is on our dime, then that's going to drop to more like 10%. But we try to build in that whenever possible. But a lot of grantors, I'm learning, are much more interested in bringing forward the program or service and so forth. And so, we're seeing applications that have caps on our indirect costs or so forth that don't always match up with what our indirect rates are necessarily. So, that's happening as well.
Anything else? Always an exciting time of the year.
Well, that's right. So that'll be available for your consideration at the next meeting. And then just wanted to follow up a little bit on the bylaws process. We had a conversation and you took action approving kind of a narrow change or a revision to the bylaws. I'm learning a little bit about what it's like when your attorney switches law firms. So, we, and Hannes probably knows a little bit what this is all about, but, so we took that action. I drafted that language, so I sent it to our counsel and said, okay, we need to do that. Jack Marquis is our counsel. He's moved to a new firm, and I intend to continue our relationship with Jack. He has all the knowledge of the MACC, and so he sends me those forms and saying, well, you need to fill this out and fill this out to have Warner, release your files and so forth. So we're still moving through that process. So as soon as he gets our files back in his office, we'll continue with doing that. But, and just remember then, once I have all that, we'll be visiting if you represent a city or township, be bringing those forward to your councils or boards for consideration. The second part of that conversation, I think there was consensus last month to take a look at our bylaws and really probe them a little bit and have the conversation. Do they really reflect how the organization has evolved over the last 20-some years that we've been in existence? And maybe there is a need to make some revisions that help those more accurately reflect how we operate today. So to that end, I think that's certainly a worthwhile endeavor. And my suggestion to the group today is once we get past our June 6th meeting, and that's going to be a very important meeting. They're all important, but certainly we've got the agency budget up there, we've got the UWP up there, we've got the 17 through 20 TIP on the June 6th meeting, so hopefully you'll have that. I know it's not our typical meeting date, so hopefully you'll have that on your calendars and can make the 6th. But after that, when we get to our July meeting, we're back on our normal schedule. My suggestion is that we undertake that bylaws review in a study session type of format. Through the years, our experience with you all is that it is best to try to just carve out a little bit of time before our business meeting. So our study sessions have been the most successful, and we've had the best attendance when we did them, say starting at 10:30 or 11 o'clock, and we go at it for hour and a half or close to 60 minutes, and then take a break, have a lunch, and then try to condense our business meeting and make sure that we're out of here at 1:30 yet. So my suggestion would be that we begin that bylaws revision process by a study session in July, and probably have one. I'd like to take one just to get a baseline of understanding with all of you in terms of the bylaws and what they contain and your agreement and what they contain, and then we can move into a larger discussion on the bylaws, either at that meeting or subsequent ones, and just do that for a couple months to help guide our discussions. Does that seem like a reasonable way to proceed on doing that? We will try very hard to condense the business meeting, so we're not having here for half of the morning and half of the afternoon.
Steve, question.
Yeah.
Yeah, we all deal with legal counsel, and so it sounds like he's going to make some changes, and it's going to take some time. I'm wondering, at our last meeting, we went ahead and approved before the bylaw change to appoint Terry as the local government rep on the executive committee, and understanding some very unfortunate changes, obviously, in the executive committee. One very positive, David coming on board, which will be a huge asset. I've known Dave for a long time. He'll do wonderful. I'm just wondering, understanding the whole background situation with the executive committee and so on under the current bylaws, I'd like to see this organization to say, let's have Terry start attending and assisting. He's got a long background of many years on the MACC, because it sounds like it's going to be a long, drawn-out process before you get approval from all the local government. At first, you got to get the attorney to approve something, and then you got to go around to every governmental unit.
Right.
We're looking at months, aren't we?
Oh, yeah.
And it would just seem to me to make common sense to have Terry start. He will be as official as anybody else on the executive committee.
That's just it, and anybody's welcome to attend our executive committees. I mean, if you notice the last attendance, there were 2 of us there. Right. So we'd love to have you there. We don't vote on anything, so.
Does anybody have an issue with that, or? Well, Terry, do you have an issue with him?
It's just another meeting you have to attend.
Now, I can't say exactly moving forward what those dates are going to be, because David's schedule is such that we're probably going to have to look at a new date and time for executive committee meetings, but we've got a few in mind. So certainly, we can check in with you as well to see where we're thinking of going with that.
You'll find these meetings, gentlemen, very stimulating.
Much like me.
Much more. Steve?
All right. Included in your agenda packet is the latest financial report. Be happy to answer any questions you may have regarding those, regarding that. We are due for an amendment. Elise had mentioned the Step It Up grant, that's now being reflected on line 4. So we're starting to see, and of course, Kelly mentioned a couple other grants, watershed grants that are going to be amended in as well. So there's going to be some revisions. There'll be an amendment coming forth probably at the July meeting as well. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have regarding that.
Anything else for Steve? Then we'll move on to member comments. We've got a couple things here today. First of all, from our host member, Howard Bauman.
Yes, welcome to Fort Shelton Township. We got a couple of projects going. They're working on a picnic shelter right outside by the playground today.
Because that's what it is.
That's what's going to go in there, and some picnic tables and grills, and we're doing several miles, 6 miles of seal coat on our local roads this summer. That's the chip seal. They're not as good as the hot mix asphalt overlay, but We can do probably 5 miles versus 1 mile, and they'll hold that road for a while and try to prevent some of the winter damage. And then we did apply for a Department of Natural Resources Trust Fund for a grant to do some improvements at One's Nest Park, which is a township park located behind Consumers Energy, which is open to the public. So we'll see what comes of that grant application. Other than that, welcome, and we're glad you're here.
Great. And sticking with the Bauman theme, Joe?
We had to follow that, huh? I serve on the McDowell Area Express Authority Board on behalf of Holland Township. And Russ is not able to be here today. I guess he's out of the country for 2 weeks. So I just want to encourage everyone to vote on May 3. The MACC Authority has a 0.4 mil renewal on the ballot. And we would encourage everyone to vote on that day that are eligible to vote. And we have been trying to keep our budget funded by that 0.4 mil. And we've been able to expand our service. We've got a full route into Zeeland now. We've got a couple of after-hour routes as well, and ridership the last month has declined a little bit, but overall it has increased year after year. So we encourage those who are eligible to make sure you get out and vote on May 3.
Did I read in the paper you're looking for the 5 million riders?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. It's amazing, isn't it?
You have to start riding, Terry. Maybe you could be that 5 millionth rider, and we'll name a bus after you.
If I got to ask a general question, if you read the Sentinel, you'll know that Park Township's looking for professional planning services. Unfortunately, I think we've just dismissed a very good guy. And my question, I've talked to some of you individually beforehand, but if anybody has any staff on board that's a professional planner, and you might have a slice of that we might be able to contract, obviously we would pay. Would you let Jerry Felix or I know? Because we're looking, we're probably going to have to go to a company, but we have some immediate needs. Anybody here right now think you might have some availability? Okay, thank you.
Any other members? Any comments?
Maybe just a quick comment. Laketown Township has a proposal on our ballot as well. We have a very energetic citizens committee working to provide at $8.5 million high-speed fiber optic internet service for every home in the township. Seems to be received very positively. I have some blank ballots in my trunk if any of you would be interested. But it's generated a lot of interest, and I have every expectation that it will in fact pass. It's drawing a lot of attention, not only statewide, but some communities in Ohio and Indiana are already asking us questions. There's a lot of information on our website, and I don't have the website for our Citizens Committee with me, or I'd point that to you. But a lot of signs out, mailings going out. There was a large telephone campaign over the weekend, but it's being received very nicely. And in my opinion, high-speed internet is as necessary as good roads and fire departments. You need it, your kids need it, your grandkids need it, and there are certainly substantial areas in our township that just are not being served and very likely never would be. I'm on a first-name basis with several vice presidents from Charter Communications and their technical people. They're very interested in what we're doing also.
I bet they are.
Yes, they are. That would be it. Thank you.
Great. Anything else for the good of the order?
If not, our next meeting will be at Park Township at noon on Monday, June 6th. Jerry will be our host. Anything else before this board? If not, I entertain a motion to adjourn. Support? Yeah, motion and support. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Thank you all.
Good luck with your minutes.
Thank you.
It is very